welcome back. I'm going to do a few pages from this book today. A Hamlin Pictorial History of the 20th Century, with a foreword by Lord Briggs, Chancellor of the Open University. I've got a wee bit of a cold, so I apologise if my voice isn't too great. I'll do my best. This was released in 1997, by the looks of it. Well, first published in 1989. This edition is published in 1997. So, the 90s is the most up to date. There's quite a lot of things happened in the 20th century that are worth talking about, I guess. I'm just going to start flicking through the pages and just pick out different things. Picture of Live Aid. My wife's father is a pilot, and he was flying a blimp over the stage when Queen were playing, and he's not really interested in music, so instead of watching from above, he read a book about Hitler, I believe. A bit of a missed opportunity. Read a wee bit. So, the 1900s, the first decade of the new century, a century that was to see far more far-reaching changes than any previous period in human history, began with celebrations of stability. For the traditional ruling classes of Europe, it was to be the last decade of relative peace and security before the cataclysm which was to engulf the Western world in August 1914. Already, though, the strains were beginning to show beneath the apparently unruffled surfaces of empire. In the Tsar's Russia, the first stirrings of revolution were already claiming lives on the streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg. In Great Britain, the Victorian sunset lingered on to light the comfortable imperialism of the Edwardian era, while at home the birth of the Labour Representative Committee and overseas the conflict in South Africa pointed the way to uncertainty and change. In Germany, the Kaiser began a programme of naval rearmament, which was watched with growing unease by her European neighbours. Meanwhile, the US attained her industrial maturity and stood poised to enter the world stage as a major international power. That's the situation at the turn of the century. So that's the San Francisco earthquake and fire of 1906. Just going to read one from each month. So, 1st of January 1900, British protectorates are set up in Nigeria. On 9th of February 1900, Dwight Davis creates the Tennis Cup. I went to some Davis Cup games a couple of months ago. Never heard of Dwight Davis. That's named after. March 13th, 1900, the British Army captures Bloemfontein. April 4th, the Prince of Wales shot at in Belgium. 14th of May, the second Olympic Games open in Paris. 4th of June, Rodin exhibition opens in Paris. 1st of July, 1900, the maiden flight of the airship built by Count von Zeppelin. August 14th, Allied troops relieve besieged embassies in Peking. September 19th, Alfred Dreyfus pardoned in Paris. October 16th, Tories win the British general election. Boo. November 6th, McKinley wins US elections for Republicans. The Boxer Rising. Throughout the 19th century, less populous but better managed countries had exploited the fragmented and often almost helpless giant China, whose weakness had been increased by disabling internal quarrels. Countries like Japan, the United States, and most of the great European states had carved out often conflicting spheres of interest through a complicated series of treaties with little respect for long-established Chinese susceptibilities. These foreign interventions occasioned a deep and growing resentment among Chinese of all classes. This became focused in the Boxers, a group of volunteer Chinese militiamen who were encouraged by the Chinese authorities, sometimes openly, sometimes secretly, to oppose the depredations of the foreign devils. This opposition had already manifested itself in the occasional murder of foreign missionaries, but it flared into general violence in Peking with the murder of a German minister, Baron von Ketteler, on June 20th, and the siege of the foreign legation. The affronted foreign powers immediately formed an international expedition, well armed and commanded, which relieved the besieged legations on August 14th. The Dowager Empress and her court, who had encouraged the Boxers, fled from Peking on the arrival of the expedition and soon accepted the terms of the foreign powers. These included the punishment of 96 senior officials, large reparations in gold, the acceptance of a strategic string of foreign forts, and expressions of regret. The interpretation of dreams. In October 1900, the Austrian psychiatrist Sigmund Freud, 1865 to 1939, published his seminal book. Although it was only read by a few specialist psychiatrists at first, the insights it contained were so new and profound that in time it would change the whole way in which human beings saw themselves and their psyches. Freud's psychoanalytic techniques of free association and interpretation of dreams have been developed by many different schools, but his ideas remain basic to them all. He is seen here with his eldest son. In 1938, following the Nazi occupation of Austria and the persecution of Jews, he left Vienna for London. Genius at work. Pablo Picasso, 1881 to 1973, showed his virtuosity at a very early age. He was already an accomplished draftsman as an adolescent and was producing excellent academic portraits at the age of 16. Very few of his early drawings survive from this, but this rare, undated self-portrait comes from about the turn of the century. It shows none of the violent distortions that were to outrage his detractors a few years later with the launch of Cubism in the shape of his Demoiselle d'Avignon. In the course of his long career, he went on to develop many other styles, including Surrealism, Expressionism, and Abstractionism. See page 37 for Demoiselle d'Avignon. Referring to this, the birth of Cubism. The French artist Georges Braque, 1881 to 1963, painted in the Fauve style until the arrival of the Cubist art form around 1907-08. Although Picasso is usually credited with inventing Cubism, Braque was the first to exhibit a Cubist painting. Lawyer breaks law. Mohandas Ghandi, 1869 to 1948, a brilliant young Indian lawyer practicing in South Africa, announced that he intended to break a new law about to be imposed by the government of Transvaal, which would require all Indians living there to be fingerprinted and to carry a special certificate at all times. Talks with Churchill. Ghandi had already been to London to talk to the Colonial Secretary, Winston Churchill, who had told him that the British government would not agree to this new racial law. But as the Transvaal would shortly become self-governing, this reassurance was not much use. The Transvaal government had made it clear that they intended to go ahead with the law the moment they became independent. Ghandi did as he said he would and refused to be fingerprinted. He was promptly jailed, but as often happened later in his life, he was more of an embarrassment inside prison than out. Discussion with Smuts. General Smuts, then State Attorney for Transvaal, was a sensible man and immediately realised this. He took steps to undo the mischief that the provincial government had done. Ghandi was summoned to a secret meeting to discuss the matter. He was ready to compromise on one or two minor matters, and Smuts then freed him. In later years in India, Ghandi was not to be so accommodating to his captors, and they came to learn that putting him in prison was one thing, but getting him out again was quite another. That's what a statement. The baby emperor. The little boy standing on the right became Emperor Puyi of China at the age of 2. Not surprisingly, the real power lay with the regent, his father, Prince Chun, who is seen next to him. Little Puyi ascended the throne on the death of the Dowager Empress Josie, who had effectively controlled the throne through a number of dynastic shuffles. She had been the concubine of the Emperor Xianfeng, and when he died in 1861, she grabbed the throne for her son, the Emperor Sejong, ruling with him as co-regent. He died childless in 1875, and she immediately replaced him with her nephew, the Emperor Kwangsu, who died very shortly after the Dowager Empress in mysterious circumstances. The Dowager Empress was a powerful woman, and the two emperors that she reigned with were merely puppets. She kept the reins very firmly in her own hands and made all the important decisions. She had encouraged the Boxers and had to flee from Peking on the defeat, but after she had made her peace with the Western powers and Japan, she returned to Peking and took up command again. Puyi was not to last very long as emperor. There were powerful nationalist and republican forces at work in China, and they surfaced violently in 1911. Puyi abdicated in 1912 at the age of 5, and the long reign of the Manchu emperors was over. Let's skip forward a few years. Just grab a few pages. 1921. Babe Ruth. In 1921, Babe Ruth Wright scored 177 runs, a Major League Baseball record that still stands. Lou Gehrig left was another outstanding player. His 184 RBIs in 1931 is an American League record. Mother of a statesman, Lady Randolph Churchill, 1854 to 1921. Mother of British statesman Winston Churchill, came from Brooklyn, New York. Lenin's new economic policy. At the 10th Party Congress in March, Lenin announced that the first elements of the new economic policy, grain seizure, was to be replaced by a tax, and private trade would gradually be legalised to revitalise the economy and improve the food supply. At the same Congress, Lenin, above left, sent the Red Army out against the sailors of Kronstadt. These sailors had been part of the revolutionary vanguard in 1917 and were now staging a revolt, condemning the lack of democracy and popular participation in the new regime. Many people had hoped for mass involvement in the running of the state, but these aspirations were now shattered. And this photo above is caricatures erected outside the Kremlin during that Congress. Sacco Vanzetti. On July 14th, a jury in Massachusetts found two Italian anarchists, Niccolo Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, guilty of murder, although it was obvious that the trial was rigged. In spite of many appeals and a wealth of evidence which pointed to their innocence, they finally went to the electric chair in August 1927. One of my favourite books is by Bill Bryson, and it's called One Summer, 1927, and it's basically just broke up into discussing May, June, July and August in America in 1927, and all the different things that went on. And they discuss the Sacco Vanzetti case. It's an absolutely brilliant book. I recommend it. I might actually read a few parts of it, but it's one of those, it's like a novel, it's written like a novel, so it's, you can't dip in and out like you can with these books. Moving on. Birth control in March. Dr. Marie Stokes, 1880 to 1958, opened her first birth control clinic in London. Most clergymen and many doctors opposed it because they feared it would encourage promiscuity. A couple of pages again. There's stuff on every page I could read, but I'm just... The death of Monet. Claude Monet, 1840 to 1926, regarded by many as the greatest of the French Impressionists, died in 1926. He is particularly noted for his series of pictures of a single subject painted under varying conditions of light, his most famous being Rouen Cathedral, water lilies, and the Houses of Parliament. Early television pictures. In 1923, John Logie Baird in England and C.F. Jenkins in the United States of America devised a crude television system consisting of a series of moving black and white silhouettes. A couple of years later, they were able to transmit moving pictures in halftones. Winnie the Pooh is born. Winnie the Pooh, shown here with his friend Piglet, is an illustration by E.H. Shepard. An illustration by E.H. Shepard was born this year in a series of stories by A.A. Milne, 1882 to 1956. We're in 1935 now. The Long March. October 20th, 1935 saw the end of one of the most remarkable feats of military endurance in the history of the 20th century. A year after their escape from the nationalist blockade at Chiang Sai, the communist forces of Mao Zedong finally took refuge in the province of Shanxi in the northwest of China. In the intervening time, the 20,000 men had marched some 6,000 miles through the mountains of western China, fighting both nationalist and provincial forces as they went. Many had died in the process, while others had been left behind to establish the bridgeheads of revolution. The Long March came to occupy a central place in the mythology of the Communist Revolution, forming the theme of many songs, paintings and tapestries. Showing left. The invasion of Ethiopia. The invasion of the African kingdom of Ethiopia by Mussolini's forces on October 2nd, 1935 came after a long period of preparation and military build-up. The first Italian troops had left for Italy, The first Italian troops had left for Italian Eritrea on the Ethiopian border on February 1st, and further mobilisations had taken place throughout May, June and July. In August, Mussolini called up 40,000 men as Ethiopia braced itself for the coming conflict. As Italian infantrymen crossed the border, bombers flew over, attacking first the frontier town of Adowa. The Emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, top right, protested to the League of Nations, but despite an international outcry, only limited sanctions were imposed against Italy. While Britain and France sought to negotiate a compromise solution, the full force of Italy's modern army, with all its tanks, air power and poison gas, was mobilised against the poorly armed Ethiopian tribesmen. Shown above in this picture. Assuming this is Italians, although I'm not sure. Ethiopians, but I'm not sure. By the end of the year, Mussolini's forces were estimated at some 650,000. Yeah, it's Mussolini's forces. Picture of Winston Churchill with atomic gun. The British Bulldog's indomitable fighting spirit. Winston Churchill tries out a Tommy gun during an inspection tour of defences in the northeast. It's a Tommy gun, she. No more silk stockings. Many familiar goods disappeared from British shops early in the war. This London store showed ingenuity in painting a customer's legs to simulate stockings. A photograph of St Paul's Cathedral surviving during the Blitz. Quite powerful propaganda. Well, not propaganda. Right, let's move a wee bit away from the craziness. And then we go straight down. The Coronation, 1953. At the climax of the ceremony, the Archbishop of Canterbury lifts the crown of St Edward high in the air before lowering it onto the head of your undoubted Queen. Later, a kneeling subject pays homage to the new Queen. Outside, despite the cold, wet weather, 2 million people waited. At least 30,000 spectators had camped overnight in the mall. Tickets for seats in the stands changed hands on the black market for £40 to £50, while a balcony in a choice site overlooking the route cost as much as £3,500. Meanwhile, history was also in the making. Around 2.5 million television sets in living rooms up and down Britain, where half the nation gathered to watch the day's events. From then on, sales soared. mass television had arrived. Korea, the final flicker. The Korean War did not end with a bang or a final heroic gesture, but fizzled out when both sides got tired of the sporadic one-off operations which took place over the early months of the year. Above is a photograph of American flying boxcars dropping supplies to embattled US Marines. Drums of aviation fuel wait in readiness for the first Marine Air Wing. Korean prisoners await the end of the war behind barbed wire. An American howitzer blasts away in the final weeks of the war. Everest conquered, 1953. Everest at 29,028 feet is the world's highest mountain and was finally scaled by Sir Edmund Hillary of New Zealand and Sherpa Tenzing Norgay of Nepal on May 29th, 1953. The mountain, which the Tibetans called Chomolungma, the mother goddess of the world, had defeated 9 previous attempts, including the ill-fated Mallory-Irvine expedition of 1924. Working with the very latest equipment, including portable radio and closed-circuit oxygen systems, Sir John Hunt's expedition, sponsored jointly by the Royal Geographical Society and the Joint Himalayan Committee of the Alpine Club, approached the mountain from the southwest and established 8 camps on the ascent. Hillary and Tenzing left the Union Jack, the Nepalese flag, and the flag of the United Nations on the summit, shown above in this photo. (1957) Rebellion in Cuba. During the last months of the year, the rebel 26th of July movement, operating from its base in the eastern mountains of Cuba, stepped up its campaign of guerrilla attacks on communication centres and sugar plantations throughout the country. The rebel leader Fidel Castro, shown above, declared total war on the dictatorial regime of President Batista in the hope of precipitating economic collapse. On September 5th, the government faced a serious challenge when rebel fighters and Cuban Navy officers tried to seize the naval base of Cienfuegos, but the attempt failed and the ringleaders were executed. Elvis. In 1958, Elvis was drafted into the US Army and served overseas in Germany to intense media attention. His experiences formed the basis of one of his most popular movies, GI Blues. (1964) Nobel Peace Prize for King. The American black civil rights leader Martin Luther King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for 1964 in Oslo, Norway, The award was made in recognition of his work toward racial integration in the United States. Jean-Paul Sartre, and the 59-year-old existentialist philosopher, novelist and playwright Jean-Paul Sartre, 1905 to 1980, declined the Nobel Prize for Literature on the grounds that it gave undue weight to a writer's influence. Mandela imprisoned. In June of 1964, the black nationalist leader Nelson Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment by a South African court, having been found guilty of conspiring to overthrow the white government. You might be able to hear my cats running about outside the door. They appear to have the zoomies at the moment. 11:30. Just ignore that. '71, the death of Satchmo. Born with the century in 1900, Louis Armstrong, alias Satchmo, to his innumerable adoring fans, died in 1971 after 3 years of illness. His remarkable career had established him as the greatest of jazz musicians and undisputed leader of 20th century popular music, and indeed one of the greatest musical figures of all time. Loved for the warmth and generosity of his personality, as well as his genius on trumpet, Armstrong is seen in characteristic mood in this endearing picture, holding an impromptu performance with young neighbours on the steps of his home in Queens, New York, just a year before his death. The boy is playing a toy trumpet given to Armstrong by nurses in the hospital where he had recently undergone treatment. That's a nice picture. '79, Revolution in Iran. Popular opposition to the regime of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi reached fever pitch in Iran during the early months of the year. The streets of Tehran and other major cities became battlegrounds as opponents of the Shah staged vast demonstrations to protest against poverty and repression, particularly by the hated nationalist National Intelligence and Security Organization SAVAK. Encouraged by taped messages from the exiled Ayatollah Khomeini, which were circulated among Iran's mullahs, a wave of strikes in major industries brought the country and the economy to a virtual standstill. Statues of the Shah were torn down, and many people were killed as the security forces tried to contain unrest. You might have heard my cat again. The Shah leaves Iran. On 16th of January 1979, the Shah and the Empress Farah left Iran and flew to Egypt for what was described as a vacation, but was to become a permanent exile. On February 1st, Ayatollah Khomeini returned to his country after 16 years in the political wilderness to be greeted with adulation by 3 million people who had crowded into Tehran to welcome him home. 10 days later, the military withdrew to their barracks, and the post-Shah administration of Dr. Bakhtiar fell. Revolutionary Islamic government in Iran had begun. Demands for Shah's extradition. Demands for the extradition of the Shah intensified towards the end of the year. Muslims besieged the hospital in New York City where he had arrived for medical treatment. Above right. Is that this photograph possibly? And in Iran itself, a group of revolutionary students occupied the American embassy, taking its staff hostage and threatening to kill them unless the Shah was returned to face trial. The stage was set for a dangerous confrontation. Hey guys, I'm going to go. My cat wants some attention. She's 8 years old, and until about 2 months ago, would never let us go near her or clap her. And then all of a sudden, she loves me and she wants me to get her claps all the time. So she's pushing to get into the room actually. Hello?